Sunday Superversive Livestream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with my co host, Anthony Marquetta. Anthony, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. I bet. Uh, the West is fallen and you're feeling fantastic. Uh-huh.
It's the
Uh
only way to feel.
it's true. It's true. Billions are dying and he feels fantastic. We're here today with our guest, Felton Faux, the third prize winner for the third volume of the Passage Prize. Felton, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I hope you guys are doing well.
We are. It's a beautiful Sunday. Uh, I napped through it mostly, but I've got a really late job, so it's all good. The sun dappling the brickwork like a hot summer sun on a sidewalk. Egg. I don't think these writing classes are doing me any good. Uh, no, let's talk a bit about it. Let's talk a bit about your work in the Passage Prize. Quite frankly, the Passage Prize is something that I've seen from afar off. Very prestigious, a lot of big names and new names that became big interacted with it. But I'm just interested in what you did for yours.
Yeah. Uh, my work, my short story is called The Reckoning. If anyone has a copy, you can find it on page 165 of Passage Prize 3. Um, and it's a very short story. Only let me count one, two, three, four, 5 pages on it, and it covers. Um, uh, Historically inspired, certainly not historical, by the first capital of the state of Illinois, which was Kaskaskia along the river. Um, and Kaskaskia through the years experienced a bit of a downturn, and then eventually was consumed by the Mississippi River, um, for a variety of factors that are uh, hotly debated sometimes among the nerdy types of historians that like to look into that kind of thing. But it, it's it's frankly an honor and to be in a work like this, anthology like this, alongside so many other uh, fantastic writers. There's obviously some excellent talent, from names that may be evident to people that look around on Twitter, and see some of the work, and then some names that people don't really know quite as well. But it's all fantastic, and frankly, reading through the other work, I'm astonished to be in their company. It really is fantastic stuff, and in the fiction portions of this.
Oh yeah, Anthony and myself have rubbed shoulders with giants we may or may not have deserved to be in the same room with, and it's always very impressive, especially as the older generation kind of ages out of their glory. It helps us have that inspiration to look up to. Especially because here, at least among us remnants of the superversives, we're not subversives here. We are not destroying or subverting what came before, except where it's hateful to God. Um, so it's part of the cycle. These things rising and falling. A good example of this is the There Will Be War series by Jerry Pournelle way back when. Anyone who was anyone in Mill Sci-Fi was published by Jerry Pournelle uh, in There Will Be War. And in the same way, things like Forbidden Thoughts, Castalia House in general, Passage Prize, even things like more modernly, like Passage Prize and Man World, people who are anyone sort of get published there. And I don't mean that they don't earn it, as in it's a popularity contest. I mean it kind of is, but in the sense of like they earned it through skill and name, unlike what we see in the Big Four and other places.
Yeah, and I was thinking on the drive back here. today, back to my little apartment that I've got. I was thinking about where the crawdads sing. It's kind of your typical. I don't remember when it was published, but modern novel that you might see come out of one of these big four publishers. And I remember reading through it. It was not a particularly complex work. It
Mm,
was it had a novelty factor. Something that makes you grab on and chow down on it like junk food, and churn through it in like an out and like an afternoon or the course of one day.
yeah,
um but at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of substance underneath. There's not a whole lot of uh not all literature should be didactic, but there's no didactic um impetus behind any of the work or anything like that. And it really feels like it's a good representation of everything that you will typically see out of a mainstream publisher, where maybe it has the veneer of uh, it comes across in whole sentences, and it's got a little bit of a hook
mm,
that makes it exciting to read in the moment. But once you get through it, you can't even really remember what you read, or it has no notable impact on you know your thought or how you
right.
conduct yourself, because it's just junk food. And that's certainly not what I see out of the Passage Library, and more broadly. Um, like you said, not trying to be subversive, but superversive. What is it? Superversive, right?
Superversive.
Superversive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to be more superversive and reclaim um all of the good things that came with works. I don't know, prior to the 1960s. Uh,
Mm. Yeah, it's looking back, to that period, it astounds me that people just don't see time and time again, subversive and destructive attacks on our literature, even our TV. It's like it's even got names in Wikipedia pages and all this other stuff. Somebody does some betrayal in government, like Mike Pence, and then he gets uh, um, like a multi-million dollar book deal in an age where there's almost no sales, and everyone gets surprised when I call it payola.
yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where I don't understand it. It's like talking to evangelicals about certain things happening in the Middle East. It's like, yeah, well, they were punished for destroying that statue of Jesus, right after the international outcry. Yeah, but still, it's like it's hard to explain to people. They want a certain view of the world, and rather than seek truth in all things, always submitting to what God sets as truth over the world. It's hard to do. You can't red pill the normies. The normies have to red pill themselves. Is what I'm
Mhm.
coming to.
And I think an important point when you're uh, looking at that aspect, what's out there for everyone to see and to view. I I don't. You have to have good literature and good art out there to you know be interpreted. But I think more
Hmm.
important is the monopoly that has been given or taken on the interpretation of these works. Uh,
Yeah.
so, like, a good piece of literature um, will be kind of a lens into seeing the world. I like to think like it kind of points in a direction somewhat vaguely, and then you kind of figure out on the horizon what it says. So kind of an example of that. And I could very much catch some flack for for saying this, but To Kill a Mockingbird, um, I think at a fundamental level is a good, reasonably good piece of literature.
Right.
It has been lambasted, particularly by people on the right wing, for years, and it's and that. lambasting has kind of picked up pace, really even over just the last 5. And it's kind of enshrined as an excellent lesson in race consciousness and things in America, which
Mm,
from one view it is. But
right.
if you were to take out the race element of To Kill a Mockingbird, and isolate that and look at the rest of the book, it's really quite a conservative work in what we think of as today's conservatism, because it
Right.
says, you know, these political and judicial cultural structures can be subverted and
Mhm.
um, used to attack the very foundations that they're supposed to support. And then in that instance, extrajudicial justice is your only um, recourse, and it's actually good.
Yes.
So you have those two different interpretations. I think one like that would give um, uh, the status quo interpretation of that book. It would make the hair on a literature professor's neck stand up. Um, but there is an argument to be made for that. But
Mhm.
but you will never hear that argument. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so being able to kind of break that monopoly on interpretation, I think, is just as important as getting new work out there.
Well, with To Kill a Mockingbird specifically, it struggles against, how do I want to put it, like cultural interpretation in the moment. In this moment right now, where we have so much violence, where essentially asylum dwellers, or people who would have been executed long before all the murders, the many murders perpetuated daily, that are even televised, practically. You can pull up a new murder on Twitter basically every day, um, if you know where to look anyway. Like, To Kill a Mockingbird actually looks quite poor. Well, we have to give every man his time. We don't want to prejudicially judge. And then it's like, before this thing, I wasn't even looking for the image, but I saw an image of Irina Zaruska, the woman on the train. Like, just came up on the feed. uh, these things, we don't have to live this way, and I don't think Atticus Finch would accept that either. Not that he would, suddenly turn into a pro lynching chud or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't, if somebody went, you know uh you're a defense attorney, but this guy, here's his rap sheet, here's this, we expect you to do what's honorable, because Atticus Finch is an honorable man. uh uh Julius Caesar reference. But I don't think he'd turn out the way liberals want him to turn out. I
Mm.
think in actuality, he, even though they don't really bring it up as much, he does have an entirely Christian morality. He seeks truth above all. He chooses to be, to do the right thing rather than the popular thing. There are many very good lessons from Atticus Finch that, quite frankly, I've taken into my life. Like, I might say something like, the Rick and Morty thing, where it's like, your booze mean nothing, I've seen what makes you cheer. But really, there's no difference between that mindset and, Atticus Finch saying, I don't care what you guys think. There's going to be a trial. You're not lynching this man, you know,
Mhm.
and then walking up to them and coming to them individually, breaking apart the crowd. Admittedly, it's very nice and it's never going to interact like that. But it's a different spirit from what literature teachers might teach about it. What makes Atticus special isn't his liberalism for the time, which we would like the idea that he would vote anything, but Republican nowadays is ridiculous. But he, in reality, he's an honorable and truthful man. That's what the foundation is. not some sort of like, I don't know. It's deeper than a literature teacher would like, but it's still, apparently might have been written by Truman Capote and then
Yeah.
given to, which to me is a plot line I just wasn't expecting.
Really, it was always very obvious to me because she never wrote anything else.
Well,
I
she
never thought
released.
about it.
Yeah, and she released what was purportedly like the original manuscript,
Yeah,
Mm,
that was in Ghost of the Watchmen, which, and, in the context of this conversation, it is an interesting. I don't know as well as To Kill a Mockingbird, but it is an interesting uh, book to bring up, where uh, uh, Harper Lee's representation, comes
mm,
back to Alabama and starts to talk with, her father. I don't remember. I think it was in the '60s, and he is ingratiated with all of the Southern, a typical the typical culture of what a Southern guy might be doing
mm,
in the 1960s rural Alabama. Like, I don't remember if there was an affiliation with, any kind of Ku Klux Klan that he had or something, but something distasteful, that
right.
Atticus was involved in, and kind of the thrust of the book is, well, what the heck, you're supposed to be this superior man that's doing all this
It's
fantastic
Ubermensch. I
stuff,
mean,
and yeah, and you are honest, and you are a good man, so, like, why are you affiliated with this? And I don't remember his exact argument in the novel. I have to go back and look at it.
mm,
But to your point, like, that is a thought that is like, well, just because Atticus is a good and honorable man that goes out and seeks to make sure everyone has a day in court, contrary to what, your eighth grade English teacher might have told you, he is not upending all of Southern culture in the courtroom. And this is not, American racism on trial for
mm,
Atticus Finch. It's
right.
just this one guy that, needs a pro bono lawyer, and he's going to do his job.
yeah. I have my own thoughts on this. So I'm a big fan of Flannery O'Connor, and I've also seen like a lot of what you said. It's kind of having a little bit of a cultural moment because of how race relations are working out today. Flannery O'Connor has her own comment on To Kill a Mockingbird. I found this quote years ago and it stuck in my mind. I could never find the source of it, but I believe it's real because it sounds real to me. So make of that what you will. I could be totally, making this up, but I don't think I am. I think if I really dug for it, I would probably find it. Anyway, Flannery O'Connor supposedly said when asked about To Kill a Mockingbird, she's like, it's a pretty good children's book. I think that we should stop pretending that it's not a children's book. Uh, and I think that kind of sums up my feelings on To Kill a Mockingbird.
I
Not so
think
much
that's
that
totally fair.
it's what was that?
I said, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, because I think it's kind of what you're saying. To Kill a Mockingbird is not a very complicated book. The
Hmm.
message it's teaching is not a very complicated message. The message is a children's message, right? It's also, frankly, too simplistic of a message. And I guess to be fair to Kill a Mockingbird, it's not like it's offering solutions, right? It's kind of, in a sense, it's almost like defiantly not, right? It ends in a very unsatisfactory way intentionally, right? Uh, the guy that Atticus is defending is killed or murdered, depending on how you look at it, right? Like when he tries to escape from prison, and Boo Radley is killed by, or sorry, Boo Radley kills what's his name, Ewell? Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, he kills Bob Ewell. Uh, and then you go, okay, so like, where do we go with all of this? Well, the message is like, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't assume, right? Everybody is fighting their own battles. But somebody did point out on the right, like, it is kind of remarkable that one of the foundational works of American fiction is about a white woman who is making up a fake rape attempt on her by a black guy. and being defended by a white man in court, and the black guy is completely innocent and the white family's evil. And like, yeah, when you put it that way, that is kind of messed up, isn't it? Right? When you look, especially when you look into the statistics. So I do get it, right? Like, I do get it. I'm not going to pretend that there's nothing to the backlash either, right? Like, with all of that said, I tend to agree with you. I think it's a fine book. I don't think it's a great book. I certainly don't think it deserves its place in the canon the way that it has. I always tell people, if you really want a brilliant portrayal of like proper race relations in the United States, Flannery O'Connor's short story, Everything That Rises Must Converge, is the thing to read. I don't know. Do you know? Are you familiar with it at all?
I have not read it, but um in that vein, anything by Faulkner like is far and away gonna be superior with regards to exploring race relations.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like, I guess the message of To Kill a Mockingbird, like, there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, don't judge a
mhm.
book by its cover. Don't assume everybody's fighting their own battles, right? Okay, sure. It's a good message
Which
for children.
Yeah, yeah, and that is the surface message. You're absolutely right, and that is the message that I frankly think was intended. But I think where you get away from just a basic one-dimensional story, like I said with where the crawdads sing, which is just a time waster, and then you get into something that is literature, is something that opens itself up to multiple plausible interpretations, which I think To Kill a Mockingbird does. But I'm not going to sit here and say that you know it's foundational to the American canon. Like I think it being firmly planted in sixth, seventh, eighth grade English class is exactly where it belongs.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah, like the reason I always bring up Everything That Rises Must Converge is first because Flannery O'Connor gave that quote, and second because Everything That Rises Must Converge is a short story. It's also,
Mhm.
I think, a very remarkable short story. First off, it was written in the 60s and captures the SJW and the mindset of like the social justice warrior, right? Nails it dead on. Like the main character of that story is a classic SJW. It's great. Um, right. So the story is he is taking his mother on the bus, and his mother is uh a very he thinks of her as basically like a little racist old white lady, right? Like, and he is taking her to and from some sort of appointment. I don't even remember what it was. I'm sure it probably does. Knowing Flannery O'Connor, the appointment probably had some thematic relevance. I don't remember, but whatever. Um, anyway, and he's just thinking to himself as he looks at her how much better he is than her, right? Like, she's racist, she thinks she's better than black people. He doesn't think that though. He is superior to her, right? And then a black woman comes on the bus with a little 5-year-old child, right? And he goes, and then the guy, the main character who's taking his mother to this appointment, thinks to himself, oh boy, here we go. But then something happens. The mother looks at the child, and he very specifically states that when it comes to children, his mother no longer saw race. It like disappeared. To her, anybody below the age of 10 was simply a child, right? So, in an act of pure kindness, absolutely no ulterior motive whatsoever, and this is very important, his mother offers the child a nickel, right? And he's thinking like, and the idea is like, oh, like maybe you think it's because that she thinks she's better than him, but this is very specific. He goes, no, that's not why. She doesn't see race with children, right? Um, but the mother of the child sees what's going on and gets very offended on her child's behalf and swings her purse and nails the mother in the head with it, right? Because she thinks that she's like looking down on them, right? Offering him a nickel because, oh, she's a rich white lady and they're poor black people, right? And then they get off, the mother's stunned, doesn't say anything. They get off the bus and the son starts lecturing to her. Like, you really should have thought before you did that. It's not right, right? Like you should have seen how you would have been perceived. And then the mother collapses. She has an aneurysm and dies. Right. And that's the end of the story. He realizes like this is the last thing he said to his mother, and he starts running. And this is how a lot of Flannery O'Connor stories end, with people running from the wrath of God, but they can't escape, right? And that's the end of the story. And I think this little story kind of hits at what Flannery O'Connor was trying to say, which is she thought, I think quite correctly, that Black people and white people at the time, the old way of how they communicated with each other was not going to work anymore. There were too many hidden assumptions baked into it that made communication impossible, right? And you could see that in the story, right? Just a simple interaction has so many layers of assumptions on top of it that neither side is able to, and nobody is able to see it for what it really was, which was simply a woman being nice to a child, right? So she thought there needed to be a new form of etiquette, a way of reframing our communication, so that a way of communicating where we each understood each other's intentions and we understood all of it in advance, so we knew how to talk to each other. This is, I think, a much more mature point, right? At the very least, it hints at a solution that To Kill a Mockingbird doesn't even really try to, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct, and that's that's a lot deeper and cuts closer to the bone of actually searching for some kind of solution versus selling some kind of just a story that maybe makes you feel good. It cuts to the bone a little bit better, and it also shows that at the end of the day, the interactions between individual people, while it's going to be informed by whatever your assumptions are, and not just with race, with class, with any kind of thing that you can uh, make a preconceived notion or idea about. Like your assumptions are going to inform what you're going to do and how you think uh, that interaction is going to play out, but the individual activity could 100% go in the complete opposite direction, because you're not dealing with the strange miasma of this conglomerated racial delegation or class delegation
Yeah.
or political designation. You're just dealing with the guy that got on the bus that day.
It reminded me of I watched Matt Walsh's Anti-Racist movie. I actually saw it in theaters, and it was amusing. It was quite funny, right? And the point it made was well made, which is basically that race grifters are what they are. They're grifters, right? They're doing it for the money. There's nothing real in it, right? It's all nonsense, And I remember watching The Critical Drinker. I don't know if you know him. He's a YouTube critic, right? And he's generally kind of I would say kind of right coded is how you would put it. I wouldn't consider him right wing, but he's at least willing to talk to the right wing, which makes him de facto right wing to the left, right? So he reviewed Am I Racist and gave it a good review, but one of his points of criticism, which I thought was interesting because it shows you really aren't from here, are you, right? Is he said one of his problems was that Walsh kind of made it seem like there wasn't any real racism against Black people anymore, and it was gone. I'm like, I hate to break it to you, Drinker, but that's because there isn't. Fundamentally, boots on the ground. Sure, you will find individuals every now and then, obviously, anywhere you go, right? You'll also find individuals who hate anyone you can name under the sun, right? But in terms of a real philosophy among people that exists in the world, you're kind of not gonna find anti-Black racists kind of went the way of the dodo when the last inner city people retired in the 90s or so, right? After the civil rights era. Since then, they pretty much don't exist, right? Now, anti-white racists very much exist, if you want to call that I know there's the whole debate over, oh, there's nothing wrong with racism, whatever. Call it what you want, right? Anti-white hatred. Right? That absolutely still exists. But people who just hate Black people because they're Black, yeah, he's Matt Walsh is correct. He actually went into the deep South, into bars to try and find people, and he couldn't find anyone. And the ones who were there were yeah, my dad thought that way, or my grandpa thought that way, but I don't think that way anymore, because that's what it is. It's gone. It ended. You know,
Yeah. Well,
you
it's
can't
it's
pretend it's still there. It's not.
You heard it here,
I
folks. Racism is over.
well, I think I think that's a accurate estimation. And um you know, along the lines that you've been talking about, there's a market for uh uh, this kind of fear mongering. And it's, they'll point to historical examples and, really push as hard as they can to fabricate um, any kind of these big scary monsters that are supposedly living under the bed that aren't there. It's because it strikes at emotions. And I think that's where uh, a lot of uh, our modern big four publishing areas go with their literature as well, as just strike at an emotion or a surface level, titillation. The worst example is, of course, like, the typical romance novels that you'll see stocking all the shelves in a Barnes and Noble or something. And it'll be uh, you know women reading essentially porn, and uh, spending a lot of time getting an emotional and visceral reaction to that, and then they put the book on the shelf, forget about it, and then buy another one. That's what's happening with some of that grift as well, I think. And it's just fantastical. It's as fantastical as those novels.
Yep. Yeah. There's a great channel called The Second Story by an author named Hilary Lane. She talked a lot about this, that like basically the entire women's fiction industry is pornography. Like it's really just pornography. And and that's
Yeah.
kind of keeping like insofar as the publishers even are being kept afloat, which they're really not, but if there was anything keeping them close to afloat, it's the pornography.
Well, there are business articles out there that I've seen floating about, the fantastic return of Barnes and Noble, and how, it kind of lifted itself up uh, out of the gutter, and it was going to be bankrupt with no buyers, and it brought itself back up by tapping into social media influenced um books, and really pushing on people to get these, whether social media was bringing people into the bookstore, or the bookstore was paying influencers to market books. I don't know which way it went, but that's kind of how they did it. And you look around on social media, look at the books being promoted, and I don't know. I can't say this. I don't want to paint with too wide a brush, because I'm sure it's not exactly correct. Um, but a lot of it is uh, pretty distasteful, in my opinion. And that's not to say, I'm prudish or opposed to any kind of um, it- sexuality in any kind of book. I think it's important. I don't have a problem with the content. I have a problem with the fact that it's very bad. um and it's just bad writing. I've told a few girls that I'm very good friends with. They say, oh, I like to read. And it's like, well, what do you read? And they said, it's not porn. It's like, well, is like the act of sex very, very actively described in the prose, um like for like a page and a half, and be like, yeah. I was like, okay, that's porn.
How,
I think the
how many
I
times do
think
the sorry? Go on, go on. Sorry.
no, this is the last I'll say on this. I think the perfect way to describe sex, and what I would say is as a literary capacity, is the way Hemingway does in uh, For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is, you know, not necessarily even very heavily implied, like it describes you're in the sleeping bag together or something, but a little bit more stream of consciousness,
Mm,
rather than, uh, describing the, less medical, I guess is the way I'll put it.
I get you. I was gonna say you can tell how what its purpose is by how many times they use the word throbbing. Um,
Yeah.
uh, the book industry is something that we attack quite often, for the simple reason is that they're just pornmongers at this point. Like
Well, it used to be. It used to be. I guess it probably still is. In classical literature, like um, the trope was that if a character is having if two characters are having sex, that's not about sex.
right,
That's not about sex in the literary sense. But if uh something like Dracula obviously is the typical example of, like, this is just a total cover for a guy running around having sex with a lot of women. But, like, if an example you could think of is, I'm at the office and I put um my keys in, like, on a key holder, on a key ring,
hmm
and then the female coworker comes in and she puts her uh keys on the same key ring. Then then that means that means some kind of intimacy that would be described by a sexual relationship in, like, your traditional uh, literature, I would
yes,
say. And I just think that's the better way to do it. um
yeah, like the implication more than
yeah.
anything else, because it's like, to bring back like To Kill a Mockingbird, there's no point in that story where anyone can do it, when anyone could have a sex scene.
Yeah.
It's though the description of the attack on Miss Ewell does read like a bodice ripper, at least to me.
Hmm.
Um, but the it serves a purpose other than titillation or some other, what we would call a moral thing. Like I'm not sure on your morality particularly, Felton, but Christians here, the idea that sex outside of marriage is any sort of good is of course anathema to us. God's very clear on these things, but the at the same time, there's no hatred of sexuality either. Fundamentally, it should be channeled into the proper channels. I view people like Bronze Age Pervert as sort of a rebellion in the opposite way, in the same way that a Christian would preach temperance. Him not being a Christian would preach the opposite. Beautiful people being scared because they're in Club Tropical Excellence, and there's this Russian guy talking about a breeding program, and you've had a few too many margaritas. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm blacking out. But it's there's a liveliness to it that does serve a purpose in literature. But the fact is that it's not nearly necessary as people might say. If you're reacting to a longhouse society where the only logical sexuality that's allowed is Fabio and his glistening pectorals and long hair and flowing, and there's a horse for some reason. Like what happens is that you react and you sort of move it. If I were, hey, what would you do? Well, actually, to have a quote unquote sex scene, like you said, with the keys, I just have two people chase each other around in the forest and
Yeah.
just not describe anything. Maybe there's stags and does running around too, and they're in their Adamic glory, whatever that means. I don't know. I'm just saying words at this point.
Yeah.
I know exactly what it means, but it's there's ways to do it. There's the marriage ceremony, which as I've heard Vox say, is the pinnacle of sort of the English literature, as is the suicide to the Japanese. You would have the wedding ceremony, which is to them, a similar sort of thing. But in the American sense, having them chase each other around in the forest in the middle of the night, while stags and stuff are running around, is more than what you need.
Okay.
Like it's there's an art to it that's been totally lost,
Hmm.
and like the like it's a sort of subtlety in literature that our ancestors had, even recently, that frankly, the in one of the put it. Like in destroying so much, they've also destroyed the ability to be circumspect.
Hmm. That's right. And I a good exercise to demonstrate, the impact of, the actual description of a sexual act versus, the implication, is, just imagine the Scarlet Letter,
Mm.
and the very didactic uh message behind that particular novel. And then imagine, a 3-page long scene with, the words throbbing and slick used very often. Like, it just totally destroys it, right?
Right.
And that's the same way for a lot of books, even like East of Eden, which is one of my favorites. You've got this woman that's a villain. I believe her name is she changed her name a couple times. I believe it's Kate at one point. But she is described as, basically overtly sexual, and she runs a brothel at some point in the novel, and
Mm.
she uses her sexuality as a weapon, um throughout the novel. And obviously all that stuff is going on, but you're not sitting there, you, you're you're your breath is never shortening while you're reading it. Like, oh my god.
Oh, it's like that one. Oh, what's the name of it? It's one of the streamers. It's that long haired one. I think his name's Charlie or something. And it's like, oh, he's getting his cock out. Uh, it's like, oh, manhood. Uh, it's yeah.
And that betrays, I mean, that just indicates something wider in our culture, and I don't think it's, there's no desire to place any kind of limitations on what can be represented, even to yourself, not just broadly, even to yourself in your own mind. It's like, well, why can't I just enjoy, sitting here reading, you know page on page on page of, uh, uh you know vividly described sex scenes, or why can't I just sit around and, watch porn all day? It's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that's a huge problem. It's endemic. And it's why all of our literature, and all of our art that is
Yeah.
pushed out mainstream is just so bad.
Oh yeah. Like if there's nothing sacred, you can't actually make something sacred.
Hmm.
Uh, like when lefties and so on's, non-Christians especially try to make something sacred, if they don't have force of character or something interesting to say, it just falls flat. It'll just devolve into offering your kids up to the balls, the fire and the iron and the false gods. And if you cry about it, the sacrifice has to happen again. It's that's all there is. That's all there is to it. There's a reason why there's no Carthaginian art running around. No literature, and the Romans didn't destroy the libraries of Carthage. They actually looted them, and gave parts of it away as gifts, scattered it to the winds. So there should be something running around, but none of it was considered worth saving in the end. It wasn't valuable enough as loot for the people who conquered the Numidians and whatever to preserve. It wasn't valuable enough to be copied down again and again and again, like something like Plutarch's Lives. It just was like nobody looked at it and go, that right there is worth saving.
And I'll say, with respect to Passage Prize 3 and all the stories that I've seen, uh, uh, as I kind of work through it, it 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 seems like a book full of artists that are trying to reclaim, you know the way the literary what literature was, and what the literary space, uh, presented, since, before we became Carthage, right? And everything was just worthless. It seems like there's, very very fantastic works in there. I mean, you can talk about a couple of, and they've got some depths and some layers. One of my favorite ones is it was second place, and the title will make anyone chuckle. It's Apocalyptic Wiggers in the Shadow of the Electric Beast. Um, and like that. It is a very funny, attention grabbing title. So you flip to it, and there are some points in there that'll make you chuckle. But it's actually a very very good work. At first, I kind of sat there and thought, this story. It 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 is a very novel and prevents a very novel and strange world, um, where vampires that sacked Rome are being driven around in hearses by mummies, and they're crossing the threshold into this other world to meet with this gang of wiggers, as they're described, to get some crucial information for whatever point. They're chauffeured by this guy that is essentially a translator. And at first I thought, like, well, this is an interesting story, and it's a really novel, and fun to read about this interesting world that's created. But at the end of the day, I don't know if there's much to be garnered for it. And then I slept, slept on a little bit, woke up the next day, and I was driving around, and I thought, you know what, this is an excellent representation of. I don't know if the author intended this or not. I think that he probably did. It's a fantastic representation of uh, the internet infused world that we're living in, where all these different characters that are just wildly incongruent and living in these strange timelines and saying these strange things are all coming together and interacting with each other, um, through the power of the internet, and everyone's kind of losing their minds, and they're all really strange and weird, and making it feel like we're out on this big grand quest to do something. But at the end of the day, they're doing something as mundane as saying, like, hey, I want to read this person's text message that they sent, you know on whatever evening, which is basically what's happening in the story. Um so it, I, I think it's a very good representation of kind of the world that we're living in. And a lot of the stories that you're seeing in here are kind of layered like that. I think my favorite one, um, I'll leave mine out. My favorite story in there, it's hard to discount, um, English Bones of the Slog, because they're very good, and I think without a doubt they won the first prize rightly. Technically, they are without a doubt, I fantastic stories. Above mine, certainly, and I think above the rest as well. But the one that I like the most is called The Fence by Aldo Johnson. Um, and it is somewhat of a dark, almost gothic story, set in very mundane circumstances. But the reason I like it a lot is I believe it's set in Minnesota, kind of Midwest, and it's something that I believe is a good setting, uh, almost as a, a successor to your Southern Gothic novel that you would see from Faulkner, of course, and you can put McCarthy kind of in that camp as well. But I think an excellent setting for a Gothic novel would be farm country in the Midwest, just given the culture that your typical farmer out there might have, and the conversations that you hear them talk about. Farmers out there, they'll talk about how their grandma died yesterday on the phone with you, or their mother died, or their husband died yesterday on the phone with you, and it's just a matter of fact conversation, which always struck me as somewhat strange. But excellent, excellent fuel for, I think, a gothic novel, and the fence is kind of in that vein somewhat. But really, throughout the work, it's throughout the anthology, really fantastic work in there. I'd encourage everyone to go buy it.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful. It's like the Passage Price has shown up, um, for quite some years now. and I do hope they do more. But Patches Press has been producing excellent work. It's Conan and Lovecraft collections I have personally bought, and they're fantastic. They have the original Hardy's Boys, all the racism. Well, it turns out there really isn't that much racism. It turns out people are actually fair-minded way back when. But all the racism, you can have, like a pizza. Uh, sorry. Um, all the things they cut out. It turns out that there's cultural touchstones, not the racism. That's just me being, darkly funny on the internet.
Like I think they say swarthy at one point,
Oh
and like that's as bad as it gets in like the Hardy Boys or something.
my goodness, my goodness. But like these things, we were exaggerating, we're joking, but they took it, they looked at that, and even that was too much. Amazon is changing things up. There's references to modern things that, quite frankly, shouldn't be there. That no self-respecting author would set up as um, anything worth reading. AI slops everywhere. It's looking bad. That's why we like promoting things like Patches Press, Kursova, who was going to be our guest this week, but I accidentally double booked. But then it turned out he had double booked himself and wanted to do something else, and so we are rescheduling to the week after Mother's Day. Like there's a lot of guys doing a lot of good work, but the thing is that we haven't really broken out at the ghetto. Um, and the thing is we're way too scattered to really work through some things in ways that would create greater change. One of the best things that you can do is to go to Patches Press and just buy something. Go to Kursova and buy something, on Amazon or whatever. For me, it's like the products I've bought from Patches Prize have been fantastic. Like it shocks me sometimes there are just good products running around. Like the Mishima books for the Sea of Fertility and the Soldier Who Fell Out of Grace from the Sea. Like it's like one of those old paperback collections you used to be able to order from the backs of magazines. Penguin and others still have that quality, but among our circles, it's Castalia House, Passage Prize, Passage Press, Man's World, what's Imperium, and then quite frankly, some of the stuff that's been produced has been a little overwrought, or it's just been done before. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm not like saying you shouldn't support them if they have a product that you like, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, Castalia House did this like 5 years ago, like,
Mhm. Well,
you know,
yeah, and it's important for these places to be coming up and to have bigger names in a literary space that's you know I guess you could call it more right wing. I don't think I don't I certainly don't consider my writing in any way overtly political. But I think that mainstream and big stream public big four publishing is obviously overtly political at this point. But
oh yeah,
you need tastemakers. You definitely need tastemakers out there in the literary world or any artistic world that you know will tell you, this is the good stuff, uh, and this other stuff needs a little bit more work, or it's just flat out not good. Part of that is just the pure volume of stuff that'll be out there published, under Substack or anonymously or self-published on Amazon. Like you can't get through the mounds and mounds and mounds of garbage to get at the good stuff, and you've got to have someone with a keen eye that can discern and kind of make that taste making decision. So like that has to exist, but that also opens up the opportunity for you know subversion of that institution, like we saw with Big Four publishing. But I think it's a central node, something that that you absolutely have to have. If not, you're working through there. The tech guys very often talk about it like, well, if you put a monkey in front of a typewriter and you let him type out into an affinity, eventually he'll write Hamlet, which is true. But who's going to dig through the mountains and mountains of garbage um, to find Hamlet? Uh, so you've got to find the monkey that can do it on the first try.
Well, there's that Borges story where it's like the library, where it's like an infinite library of infinite books, and there's these people spending their entire lives reading through these books just to find little phrases of random sentences, that somehow formed out of the ether of a million billion random letters. Like, oh, what if we miss something? What if we miss the answer? Oh, what if we? It's like, no, like it's just random. Like whatever the monkey is doing, it's random. The only reason AI isn't producing random gobbledygook only it understands is because you formed it to follow TV tropes and had some authors and some formula. Once you understand the formula, you just don't need to read AI. Not that you should, but like it's for every John Del Raz, there's 1,000 Pajits just throwing, monkeys at typewriters until something falls out.
Hmm. And I personally could not be happier that AI is being trained on the current crop of any kind of literature that's being put out there, because it's just straight up not good, right? It'll reach
Yeah.
back into the public domain and find some stuff, but the things that mark like a truly fantastic writer, in my opinion. Um, I'll talk about two guys stylistically, because really you're just looking uh, 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 you're looking at style more than content, at least currently with the AI models, because they can't produce coherent content over the course of a novel. Maybe that'll
Mm.
come. I don't know. I tend to think not. Um, but like Hemingway and McCarthy, and you'll give it to Faulkner too. Um, Part of the fantastic part of the reason their work is so fantastic is this style when they wrote it was so unlike anything that has ever been really written in the world of literature before. I'd throw Pynchon in there as well. Whenever you see a new truly fantastic writer, um, they'll use their style as an expression, um, for what they want to try to get across. It's part of the art, and I don't think that
Yes.
AI can really replicate that, because it's not creating you know a, a a novel writing style. It's just pulling from past sources. Um, so I don't think there's much of a chance for that to come around. I guess I could be wrong. I don't really watch or pay much attention or try to use AI.
Well, it's we have some people who are working with it pretty heavily, but they're, shall we say, zapping the monkey.
Hmm.
Actually, that's how I'm going to refer to it. Anytime John Del Rosa Vox Day, comes up, it's like, look, they just zap the monkey until it produces something better. They're editing the monkey. Um, it's like they're doing something different than what others are doing. Like there was a scandal. Maybe you mentioned this. I blacked out for a second and I woke up. Uh, sorry, I work until about 3 to 4 o'clock in the night, and then I get up for church like 3 or 4 hours later, which I probably should just stay up for. But uh, sometimes it happens where it's like somebody forgot to take out the AI prompts in their published in bookstores book. Like I can't get published. I don't even try, but this ape, this mongoloid, this subhuman, somehow, was able to get a publishing contract, and left in the AI prompts. Um, it's ridiculous. Uh, I'm gonna, it's a legitimate crash out, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Um, you
and
know,
and
mm,
yeah, you worry about getting like absolutely you're gonna get lost in the massive sea of garbage that's coming from AI from um and like that's something that could potentially happen. So
yep,
I think that's why it's important uh to be supporting and looking after places, like Passage and the many avenues that you've described. They're out there and they know what they're talking about, um and they're actually trying to preserve good literature against the sea of trash that is coming at us from from all directions. So hopefully they're able to win the fight. They're the fiction that they published outside of Passage. I've read. Oh goodness, what is it called? I've got it here on the shelf somewhere. Um, it's Georgia Buddha, short story collection. It's the most the the most sound from a literary perspective book that I've seen that's been published uh, in the last 10 years that I've read, and I'm confident that the rest of the work is comparable.
mm, Georgia Buddha reminds me of Buddha of Suburbia, the David Bowie song, not a song, album. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's disheartening, but at the same time, it's like, no, these are our enemies. They're acting like enemies. People who are shocked by this, one, haven't been paying attention, and two, enemies acting like enemies should not be all arms, whatever, bushfire or whatever. It's malicious. They hate truth. The system is doing what it's supposed to do. Um, Cthulhu has swum left so far it's rotting. I don't know. Like
Well,
there's a whole bunch of phrases we use.
yeah, you have a bit of an easy, well, where you say, the um, enemies hate truth. Uh, that gives you a bit of an easy target, I think, when it comes uh, to the arts more broadly, because you're no matter what you're writing or painting or drawing or publishing or any kind of art you're out there, it has to be directed towards some kind of truth. It has to be. If it's not,
Hmm.
it's going to fall flat and be bad. Um, and people just won't like it, and it's just going to fall by the wayside and be forgotten. um like I Disney has been doing all kinds of remakes. Disney is an excellent case study in this. They've been doing all kinds of remakes to kind of subvert their original animated works in some key ways, and no one that I've seen is like talking about them or watching them or caring about them in any way. And it's because whenever you're engaging with something that is an artistic expression that is trying to subvert a core truth, it just rings hollow,
Hmm.
and it feels like propaganda. It feels like you're being sold something, and that is just anathema to any kind of artistic work, and a lot of times just to work in general. You talk about the Disney Corporation, and it's something that I don't like about the modern world that we're living in. I remember going to Disney World like as a child, and it didn't feel like the purpose of the place was to just take as much money as they possibly could, nickel and diming you. It was quite expensive at the time, um, but not as expensive as it is now. And it felt like the purpose of the place was to make sure that you had the best experience of your entire life if you were a child. Like that was what was wanted by the Walt Disney Corporation. It wasn't your money. You had to give them your money so they could do it, but that's what they really wanted to do.
Right.
Was to make sure you had the most fantastic experience of your entire life. Now across all walks of business, and across all walks of culture, it's I want to extract as much out of you as I possibly can. And if that means that I'm nickel and diming you for you know the entire 8 hours that you're in a theme park, and you also have to pay $1,000 to get in the door, then that's what it means. And if you don't like
Mhm.
it, just don't come. So I think, and I would say that's something that's not directed towards the truth. That kind of behavior and that kind of mindset, which I think you guys would agree with me. Certainly not toward any kind of Christian truth.
Yeah. And of course you have things like Disney adults. I saw a video where a transgender influencer was photographing himself in the women's bathroom with minor girls running around. Like there's just it's becoming a focal point of the societal corruption in ways that I think Walt Disney would despair of even attempting everything that he had built if he knew about it. Nobody like it's like that one meme where it's like men about to storm the beach at Normandy, and it's like, man, guys, imagine what we're fighting for, and then it's like insert any crime of the modern world in there, you know. In
But
reality, they
yeah, but
wouldn't. Hmm,
like obviously that wasn't what they were fighting for.
right.
And that's the implication of the image that you're describing. And they were directed towards, like, I don't know, I'm not a World War II buff, but they were directed towards some kind of fundamental truth that rang deeply within them, and rang true, and hit it didn't just hit the sensory nodes that got your addictive senses tingling. It was
Right.
something that was actually core to what you are and what you're doing. So I think, I hope that's something that I personified uh, in my story, The Reckoning. And I think that's the goal of all literature, is try to strike you somewhere deeply, and describe some kind of fundamental truth that, um, everyone everyone can recognize and uh, affiliate themselves with at some kind of fundamental level.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and let me see here. Some of the things that people say, isn't necessarily true. Like even if an angel came down and showed them a vision of the world we live in, they still wouldn't have turned around and not fought the Nazis.
mhm.
They would have fought the Nazis, one, and then turned around and lived a different sort of life. Maybe beat their boomer kids a little more or something. I don't know. The choices that were made in the past are good for the past that they lived in. It's the same way with like why I'm not, even though I'm negative on To Catch a Mockingbird. It's not because I think it's like such a bad thing. It's simply because it's more expedient today to attack it than it was yesterday when I was in school and still trying to create the man I wanted to be. I didn't want to be. I knew that I did not want to be a popular man or a man of the people or anything like that. I knew I wanted to be a man more like Atticus Finch, who sought the truth above, what his people around him said. Now, of course, it that book does not show what the actual cost is to that. Um, because there's costs that Atticus Finch would have experienced that it just doesn't go into. Like it kind of does, but in reality, nobody really takes the piss out of Atticus Finch. They might just say, but really, he was still welcome everywhere he was normally welcome to be. He went to the same church. They didn't they opened the way for him in the courtroom, all these things. Um, and that's part of the art. You want to show the good things, none of the bad, but then the bad comes up. But
Mhm.
it's better to have that sort of thing than to not have that sort of thing. It's the same way like Plutarch's Lies, how it's getting a little bit more popular and popular. Because you can see men like Fabius, men like Timoleon, and others, who lived lives of upright bearing, and the costs and the end of their deaths, and it's people who really lived. The you know, Timoleon, might have ended his life a hero, but he still had to kill his brother. And his mother never spoke to him again. It's even after he went to Sicily and became a hero. It's there were still costs to his noble character. Same with Fabius, like he had to fight the war, and then he had to endure like ridicule and hey, why are you coming back? Well, because you're not sacrificing to the gods, right? We will do this right, or we'll not do it at all. Why aren't you invading? We Hannibal's right where we want him. Yeah, Hannibal's right where he wants to be. Which is no grounds to fight Hannibal. Um, when he's sitting there, oh, look at me, I'm so vulnerable. I'm just, he's like splayed out. Oh no, I dropped my sword. Whoops. I hope nobody attacks me from the rear. That'd be really bad. And the other Roman general's like, come on, he's right there. He's defenseless. It's like, no, this is a trap. Stop it. You know.
Well, you talk about that. I mean, this is an ancient work, that that is kind of reappearing in a little bit of in a little bit of a renaissance and becoming a little bit more popular in modern days, and a little bit about the same, maybe inverse a little bit, is happening to Kill a Mockingbird, where potentially the the typical, you know high school interpretation of this book is maybe going a little bit to the wayside, or at least being challenged quite a bit. And it reminds me, uh, of a scene in, um, uh, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Victor Hugo's book,
Mm.
Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I believe it's in any conventional copy that you'll get today, but I believe it was added after the fact, to this novel. After serialized publication ceased, and there's basically a speech where Claude Froyo is standing, uh, across the street from Notre Dame, and he's holding a newly printed Bible in his hand from the printing press, and he's pointing at the church. It's a very vivid scene, and he says, he points to the book and he points to the church and he says, "This will kill that." This mass production of uh, uh, this holy book is going to kill. Um, in his interpretation, the church, but his interpretation of the church is the architectural structure and the symbolism that is present throughout it, and his position within it, um, as the a, a de facto religious leader, within the Notre Dame structure. Uh, and I think what he means by that is, the shifting, of our times and our culture, will move things in and out of relevance, um, in a very rapid way, and it can have some unforeseen consequences. Uh, so I don't think it's necessarily all that surprising. Like, if you or I, if you two or I were in high school and we wanted to talk about Plutarch, like, how many people did we have to do that with? Or if I wanted to talk about the novels of Steinbeck or Hemingway or Faulkner or Cormac McCarthy, how much opportunity did you really have to do something like that? The answer for me, I know, was I could talk with one person. That was me. Um, but
Right.
now these different works uh, that are very good are gaining relevance again, and interpretations are shifting quite a bit because you're able to engage with some like-minded people to open up some new interpretations, some novel interpretations, or just remember the older interpretations. So like you could stand like Claude Froyo pointing at your phone and say this, and then you point at, I don't know, um, something like a university English department, and you can say like this will kill that.
This kills the English professor.
Yeah, but then you could also say it's like, then you open up the phone and it says and you get TikTok reels coming across just in general of anything, short form videos, and then you can just point at a book in general, and you can say this will kill that, because in general people just don't read, and I don't know, I'm afraid it's something that's coming back, that's not coming back. um I wonder quite a bit if you're not going to have within the literary space something akin to the American cowboy, where the culture maybe still exists in some specific subsets of enthusiasts and people that really like it, and it's still quite good and it's out there, but it's very
Hmm.
limited. Um, not anything close to its former splendor, and frankly, not something that is perceived as necessary anymore, just because of shifting technology, and then everyone gets
Right.
their information in snippets of 250 characters, if they're well read, and if they're not well read, then it's a 15-second video.
Yeah. And worse things besides the 15-second video might not even be accurate. Um,
Yeah,
it's the slop
all
that's
of it could be
on.
wildly inaccurate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like it. So I went through a period of life where I doom scrolled quite a bit, and essentially I noticed that not only was the AI stuff or the voiceover stuff getting multiple remixes of like people talking, so you had multiple crunchy layers of music playing over each other. There were even like multiple language translations and like one or even two sets of English subtitles um, running around, so that you'd have one at the top and the bottom and then maybe in the middle. And then they started splitting. Not only did they have like splits in the top and bottom, but some were split in the middle between two different attention grabbers, like steel ball melts everything, and then also AI cutting fruit compilations. So you'd have like videos that were still intelligible, but like you weren't just watching them because, oh, it's some Reddit story that's probably fake. But rather you were watching because there's this like 15 different things going on at the same time, none of them good. It's like listening to like five different children try to tell you how their day went on the playground.
Hmm.
Incomprehensible.
Well,
Um,
and you're gonna get to a point. I think we're already there, where if you are able to sit down and read 200 pages of even smut that is put out there, that is going to be considered by the broader culture an intellectual accomplishment. And you are very smart because you were able to read a 200-page book, and you didn't have to sit there and engage in the activities that you're describing and have a bunch of people talking at you for 15 seconds.
That's right. I've read
I
the
think like that's
entire.
where we're
Okay,
at. I'm pretty sure that's where we're
yeah.
at.
Oh yeah. Like it's like I've read the entire million word. Not that I've done this. I want to be very clear. I have not done this. But the multi-million word Loud House fan fiction. With all the shipping side stories. It's like it's an accomplishment to read Homestuck. Like
Mhm.
and it genuinely is, and to have any sort of comprehension as to what went on. But imagine what sort of comprehension it would, what sort of accomplishment it would be in 30 years or something, to read Homestuck, or to read the million billion word Loud House fan fiction that someone autistically typed up, that is technically the longest work in the English language. The That just makes you want to suck start a shotgun saying
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Uh,
If you can get through Moby Dick and have a reasonable, well, you're not going to be able to have a reasonable discussion about it because there's not going to be
no.
anyone available to have a reasonable discussion. But if you can comprehend it in any fashion, people are going to look at you like you're a Mennonite or something. It's like, what is this? This is like, why would you be doing that? It's so much easier to just drive. Like you can just like watch 10-second videos all day. Like, why are you sitting here reading this book?
Right. What's the important part of Moby Dick? Call me Ishmael. That's all I know. It's like, fuck you, bud. Come here. I'll beat you with my cane. Oh no, Grandpa. Oh no. Listen, Generation Alpha is probably going to be cool and a little genocidal, but I don't even know what they would call the next couple generations after that, like Zoomers squared, you know, Generation Adolf Hitler, like something postmodern. Just imagine it, like the year is 2070 or something. You're like, oh, what's the next generation called? Generation Hitler.
Oh my goodness. I don't think I don't think the cultural wars have been that displaced.
No,
I
I,
think
I
that
don't think so either. I actually think, like ignoring the few actual, the 10 or so fascists not paid before by the SLPC or SPLA or whatever the fucking called. Uh, in reality, there's no cultural force behind it. Futurism has more of a cultural force. And frankly, that's been dead except for a few holdouts. Like there's no strength in it. Like the reason why it's got an edge to it is because there is something vital to it that isn't, it offends the olds basically, and
Mhm.
it's got more action in it than something like Christianity does in the way that they understand it. Like it's like when you're like not to slander my Catholic colleagues or my Catholic colleagues specifically here in the same chat room with me. But many atheists I met had the very same pattern. Oh yeah, I was a Christian, but my parents didn't. They went to church, but I hear you, Anthony, getting roused up, getting pulled out of your whatever Italians do, ravioli.
Yes.
But, but what they, this is a true friend. Like this isn't a fake story, anything like that. I spent many hours witnessing to this man. But he basically said, I believe Christianity is false because my parents treated it as false, and because they didn't, like I'm translating. And because they didn't treat it as something real, and they were clearly false, and they just did whatever they want all the time. Why does I don't believe God exists? So that's the big thing that people miss out on. Guess what? If you don't live the faith that you say you have, you're not going to pass it on to your kids, who will understand your hypocrisy better than you ever could and go their own way. It's the same way when people go, guys, the GDP will go up more if everyone's Christian. It's like, no, that's not going to make anyone want to be Christian. That's like the Renaissance artists saying they're Christian. Actually, most of those Renaissance artists worship themselves because they were willing to murder each other over architecture prices. And you don't do that if you're living a real and vibrant Christian faith.
Hmm. And I think that the fall of any kind of literary standards or uh, just our American literature in general is directly impactful to anyone that is looking to convert or looking to move over into a Christian realm. Because like what you just described to me is a guy that's actually searching for some modicum of truth,
Mm,
searching for something out there, trying to get answers. And I don't know about anymore. Probably, in the '90s, I think it was probably correct that like your standard atheist would read a little bit more than your standard boomer Christian, because they're out there looking for some kind of answer. But the problem is, whenever you have all these things that are geared towards truth, in a book, well, when you don't have that anymore and it's all just slop and trash, the
Mm.
the arts can't really help you reach that anymore. And
right.
I actually have the opinion that pretty much any I mean, I come from a Christian perspective because that is my core belief. Um, it, any good piece of literature or art has to have some aspect. It has to have a representation of Christ or the Christ story in it in some way, shape, or form. It's
Mm,
it's in there. If it's
yes.
geared towards truth, it has to be in there. If you're a Christian, and it'd be easy for someone to say it's like, well, like that's just your presupposition. So then you're just imposing it on this novel about whatever, uh, because that's just what you believe. And it's like, well, maybe um, you could probably make that argument. I'm not sure if it's really necessarily all that convincing when you put it up against um, the interpretations that you have. So, well, we've talked about To Kill a Mockingbird enough. I'll look on my shelf and see if I can find another kind of representation. Try to get one that's pretty workaday. Let's see here that everyone kind of knows. That was why I initially selected To Kill a Mockingbird, because every eighth grader has to have something like that. Um, I don't know. I'll just shoot for one. You can look at something like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and that's very obviously got very overt Christian themes uh, running throughout it. That are really pretty obvious, even if you don't uh, you're not really sharply attuned to any kind of Christian symbolism within it. Uh, of course, Gravity's Rainbow has a very evident Christ figure that you're following along throughout the novel. And one that runs a little bit against the grain of any kind of Christianity that you would think would be Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Here's a guy that, and I don't know everything about Ken Kesey or his life, but I do know that he liked to drop acid a lot, and he liked to make sure other people did too. Um, but he's constructed this story uh, of these men that are stuck in an insane asylum with very overbearing, overpowering nurses that are giving them all these kinds of numbing medications and things which they may or may not need, but it's the prescription, so it's what's happening, and they're trying to keep them from watching the baseball game, and they're trying to keep them from doing anything with any kind of vibrancy. For some reason, I actually don't know why this book isn't talked more out on in right wing circles, because like it is the description of the longhouse, right? Um, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but then you have this guy that breaks through, and he's um, very subversive within this psychiatric ward structure, and he says to hell with it, and he whenever they won't let him play the baseball game, he'll start, play acting, making his own baseball game and talking about it and dictating about it, and everyone starts cheering along with him. And this takes the nurses off, and he breaks them out, and he takes them on a fishing trip, and it's all a very big, vibrant party. And then eventually, I don't remember under which circumstances. It's been a long time since I read it. He eventually uh, does die or get killed. Some kind of shock therapy, I believe, does it. I can't remember exactly. But he does eventually die or get killed. But uh, with that sacrifice, he frees all these subjugated men out of the psychiatric ward, where they discovered that they weren't actually crazy all along. They were just normal guys that were stuck in here. So very obviously, that's a Christ structured story written by a guy that loved acid a lot.
Yeah, I have a different relationship to a lot of the classics than some conservatives. I've actively disagreed with a few people. Like, I think probably most of what we consider to be the classics are good, even in the modern Western canon. Overrated, certainly. Good, though, probably, right? The big one, like The Great Gatsby, gets a lot of hits of like, oh, The Great Gatsby's terrible, right? And to be honest with you, I've never really heard an argument over why The Great Gatsby is actually bad. Um, do I think it should be assigned to high school students? No, but on the flip side, I do understand why. There's a very obvious reason, and it's that the symbolism in The Great Gatsby is unbelievably clear and obvious
Hmm.
and great for teaching symbolism, right? Gatsby dropped his watch and it broke. What could it mean? Like, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, but so I understand why it's taught. On the flip side, though, thematically, it's a terrible fit for high school. Like, you are not going to get anything out of that book in high school, right? Like, you're going to read it and be like, I don't get it. I don't get the point, right? But the flip side is I see people like pulp writers, like Larry Correa is big for going on this. And I'm naming names here, I know, but actively, Larry Correa has slandered my friends in public in pretty vicious, nasty ways. So I don't really feel too bad about it. Uh, Larry Correa will be like, "Oh, Great Gatsby is boring," and that's his criticism. It's boring, and the problem is, and to be fair, I've made this mistake, but people like have corrected me, and I've internalized them and like, no, you're actually right. This is not a good, not a good argument. Boring's not a criticism, right?
Hmm.
Boring is an identification that you don't
It's
think the
just,
book is
yeah,
interesting, right? For
yeah.
whatever that you don't find interesting is subjective. It's not an
Hmm.
objective quality of the book. You don't find interesting. The other thing that I hear, and it's often framed as a criticism, is the characters aren't likable. Well, again, I agree, but that's not a criticism. The characters in The Great Gatsby aren't supposed to be likable,
Hmm.
right? Like, that doesn't mean you need to like that. You can have any preference you want about who you want to read about, right? Like, you could say, no, I don't like reading about it. Okay, right, but that doesn't make the book bad. It also doesn't make the book not worth reading.
Hmm.
Um, I feel the same way. The other one, the big one that I disagree with so many people about, so many, I get so much pushback on this, is Lord of the Flies. Uh,
Hmm.
I think Lord of the Flies overall is good, right? Do I think it's great? No. Do I think it's good? Yes. The big comeback that I always hear people say is, did you know that the Lord of the Flies happened in real life? And what they will describe is, and you could easily Google this. There's a billion YouTube videos, just a billion articles, right? And it's framed as like a counter to Lord of the Flies, like Lord of the
Like,
Flies disproven,
yeah,
right?
not
The
to like not
Tongan
to inter
schoolboys.
yeah, not to interrupt. Like,
No, go ahead.
The Lord of the Flies is like, it's not meant to be a representation of the real world. Like, people need to get this through their head whenever they're reading fiction. Like, this is not meant to be like a word for word. Like, this isn't like a prediction or a historical document. It's supposed to communicate something about the real world, but if you put 10 guys on an island, they might not kill each other. Like, that's perfectly reasonable. But I 100% agree with you. that's something that irks me a lot as well.
Yeah, like with Lord of the Flies, what you see, so the Tongan schoolboys incident, in case you don't know it, is they were 6 friends who like basically played to my understanding of it, they like played hooky and took a fishing boat and they shipwrecked on an island, right? But there's just so many differences. It becomes absurd to talk about them like they're the same situation, to the point where I'm like, I don't understand how you think, like, genuinely, it baffles me that people keep bringing it up. Because the Tongan schoolboys instance, like, okay, so instead of dozens of people, you have 6. Instead of being ages ranging from kindergarten to adolescence, they're all teenagers. The youngest is 13. The oldest is, I think, either 16 or 18, right? Uh, so 6 of them, all teenagers, right? As opposed to dozens who are of varying ages, none of them older than adolescents. So think like 14, 15, right? And let's see, what else do we have? Oh, yeah, they're all friends, right? So that's a big difference. Instead of like people who are just, their bonds are the fact that they happen to go to the same school, right? Nope. In this case, they're all friends. Oh, yeah. And by the way, they're all Christian, which is the really big difference between that and Lord of the Flies, right?
Mhm.
I'm like, look, if you take the point that Lord of the Flies is trying to make in its context, I actually think that it is making a very valid point. It's an
Agreed.
Augustinian view of human nature, right? It takes months for them to break apart. People think like, oh, and they start breaking apart. No, it takes months, right? Months later, they start breaking apart because people are, you have the alpha Ralph, you have a sociopath in Jack, who is also charismatic. He's got what, like, we use some, we've imbibed some pickup artist type terminology. We are not pickup artists. We don't think they're moral. We don't think they're good people, to be clear, right? But using some of those, like, terminology, some of those traits, like you get the sociopath with dark triad traits, right? Like, and so that's Jack. And obviously he has a certain draw, and what he's promising them is, as now they've got months of little food, little water, he's saying like will to power, right? We follow me and you could do what you want, and who cares, right? And then on the other side, you have Ralph, and Ralph is trying to create some veneer of civilization. The problem is that Ralph's basis for civilization is what? The English public school system, like after the war, right? Like,
Mhm.
why are you listening to Ralph? What can Ralph offer you? What does he have to give you that Jack doesn't have? The answer is nothing, right? And that is Golding's point. Golding's point is post-war English society, where is basically running off of inertia, right? Like, it doesn't have any real basis in anything real. Of course, Christianity is the thing real, but they wouldn't be, and they aren't explicitly in the book Christian, right?
Mhm.
So why would they care about that? And that's why it ends with them being found by the British people and going, "Oh, you're acting civilized, right?" In the meantime, it's heavily implied there's some sort of nuclear war going on in the background. That's why it took so long for them to get there, right?
Mhm.
So I think the point is well made. I think it's correct. I think it's this idea that you need some sort of grounding because humans are fallen, right?
Mhm.
It's a very Augustinian view of human nature. And yes, if you have that grounding, humans are capable of great things. They're capable of cooperation, like the Tongan schoolboys. They're capable of survival, of rising to the challenge. But without it, you can't expect anything greater when there's when no reason is being given, right? The reason
Mhm.
is, well, we need to act like proper British gentlemen. And the correct response to this, frankly, is, but why? Why do we need to do that?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I 100% agree with it, with everything you just said about Lord of the Flies, and it's uh, that to me that was the central point of the book, is whenever you try to unmoor yourself from some kind, from the higher authority that does exist, um the only thing that that will matter in the balance whenever that's not present is power imposed by barbarity and and intense uh, suffering and violence, and eventually you will just devolve into that. So
Precisely. That's
it,
why. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Please finish your
No, no,
point.
no. Like that's just the fundamental representation of the book, and that's the point it's trying to get across, and in a lot of ways. But people will look at it and say it's like, well, like some of these guys went out on an island, and they didn't dance around a severed pig's head and start killing each other. It's like, well, it's it's not exactly trying to say that within this, like, the boys are not the boys. The boys are, the entire, one of the boys is France, and one of the boys is the United States, and one of the boys is Great Britain. Like, right? Like that's what it's getting at.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you have like the final conflict between Jack and Rolf again. Like it struck me. I've also seen people go, "This didn't seem real to me," right? Like I can't imagine. It's like then you went to a different school than I did. I absolutely could, right? I knew
Yep.
sociopaths like Jack,
Yeah.
and I knew people who would
Yep.
rally around them, right?
Yep.
And I also knew the Ralphs of the world who would try and hold the line against them. And who would win? Well, it's hard to say. Golding's perspective is that the Jacks of the world would win because the Ralphs don't have a real argument or a real mooring, right? Like,
Hmm.
of anything to anchor themselves to. And then, you get the Piggies and the Simons, right? Like, who are just bullied and who are, or who are too good for this world, right?
Yeah. And well,
Uh,
yeah, Simon was the Christ representation in that novel, if I remember correctly. I'm always terrible about
yes,
remembering character names, but he was the blonde guy that was out on the boat.
correct.
Um, and he's basically sitting there, not really aggressively trying to stand in the way, but he is like a moral pillar. And at the end of the day, they say, why don't we just kill this guy?
Yeah, exactly. It's
Um,
Yeah, it's a
so-
complete I agree. I actually think it's quite a good book, and so many things I see people like they go, I hate this book because, and then they'll go like, and William Golding's a terrible person and because he said this, and I'm like, okay, I still think it's a good book.
yeah. And I'll circle back around a little bit to Gatsby, because that's a novel that I would say I know quite a bit better than a lot of others. It's right in my wheelhouse.
Sure.
I like Hemingway, Steinbeck, things from that era, and I think I know Gatsby pretty well. And to say that it's bad or it's boring, um, is like a representation of your personal taste, and it's fine to not like something. Um, but then to come out and say like it is technically bad and no one should read it is very, very obtuse. In my opinion, because you can have something that is like I'm looking at a collection of Don DeLillo novels I have on my shelf right now, and I have started all of them and I've finished none of them, and I just don't know. I don't know why. I just can't ever uh, make it click and get myself through them, getting invested in it. It never really quite hits the right spot. But I can certainly recognize within the books that there's quite a bit of literary merit and symbolism and a message that is being conveyed about the world. I just, for whatever reason, can't make myself work through it. I would never sit here and say Underworld is bad and you shouldn't read it. Like I think it's actually quite good from what I've gotten through. It's just not quite to my taste. So with respect to Gatsby, it is an interesting novel in a lot of ways. It's got the flashy veneer, that I think a lot of high schoolers, especially high school girls, will like. Is like the 1920s and parties, and it's a love story and about this guy that's pining, um, and she's kind of huddled away, and then it has this tragic ending, that is just kind of satisfying to a certain person, to just have this love story on the surface, but beneath it there's quite a bit of depth, and a lot of and a couple varying interpretations that you can have, that I think is quite brilliant, also very stylistically well written, just in its own right. But I don't know if you guys remember the scene in Gatsby, whenever it's early on, and the main character's name is Nick Carraway. I think that's right. Um, and he goes to a party with I know Tom Buchanan is right. He goes to a party with Tom Buchanan and his mistress, who I can't remember her name. It starts with an M.
Jordan, I
Uh,
think.
is
No,
it Jordan?
Jordan. It
No,
was
Jordan's the
Daisy.
golfer. Jordan's the
Yeah,
golfer.
yeah. Jordan's the
But
golfer.
Jordan, I think
Sorry.
Jordan is there. It starts or his miss. Anyway, doesn't matter. He goes to this party with them, and he says it's like one of the two times he's been drunk in his life. Well, there's like a brief scene where he's standing in the elevator. Nick Carraway is with this photographer guy that's just a minor character, uh, and they're tapping on, and this minor character is tapping on the lever to move the elevator, which is a lever sticking out of the control console of the elevator, kind of in a 45-degree angle sticking up, and he's just sitting there tapping on it while he's talking to this guy, and they're going to go look at photographs, and he says, I don't really remember what happened, but I have a flash of this guy lying in his bed shirtless as he's showing me photographs, and then all of a sudden I'm back at the apartment, and a lot of people will say, whoa, 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 like that's weird, like that's a strange thing to put in there, and some l- literature teachers or professors will say, well, just disregard that. It's just something weird that happened, and he's just trying to show you how messed up he was. Some will take that way out and say, well, he has like a homosexual relationship, and Nick Carraway is obviously homosexual. Um, I think that both of those interpretations are uh, incorrect to take uh, on the whole. Um, but it's very interesting to look at it from both of those perspectives, because if you consider it from the perspective that Nick Carraway, who is our narrator, uh, is completely heterosexual and um, just a normal guy that was in a strange situation once, then he becomes a reliable narrator throughout the entire story, and you can say uh, Gatsby, and in my opinion, Great Gatsby then becomes a novel about the failure of the American dream, where Gatsby worked so hard, he has all this money, represented, has all these resources and everything, and can do whatever he has, but he doesn't have Daisy, who is a representation of the prestige uh, and uh, upper class privileges that are granted to you whenever you have vast sums of money. It says a couple times in the book that her voice is enchanting, and you can never get away from it. And I believe that Jordan says it's because her voice sounds like money, like she is the prestige of money as Daisy. So
Hmm.
if Nick Carraway is a reliable narrator, and just a friend of Gatsby, then it's saying no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, no matter how many resources you pour out and try to get a hold of, that prestige and that fantastic uh, status is going to be just out of your reach. You're almost going to get it, but it's going to be snatched away from you, and everything's going to be taken, and you're going to end up devastated. Um, Now, if you shift the prism a little bit and you say, no, that actually was a homosexual relationship that Nick Carraway had with this guy, just a fling in the 20s. Well, that changes things quite a bit, because then it really colors the relationship that Nick Carraway has with Jay Gatsby in a much different light. So you can say, like, this guy was just infatuated with this particular guy that was his neighbor. But he was obviously just a moonshiner, and he worked for the gangs, and he was just a straight up bad person that was trying to take the wife of someone else, and he couldn't see through that because he was just infatuated with this homosexual relationship that he might have think he had with Jay Gatsby. Um, and then, it kind of paints Tom Buchanan as a little bit more of a hero, even though he does some um, less than uh, moral things throughout the course of the novel, obviously. But and then
You there? I lost you for a moment.
Very uh, of these very resplendent and interesting people that pop up on the horizon, because even when you're infatuated with them, and it seems like they're very great because they're actually attacking some.
Oh no.
There's. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes, I can.
There we go. So whenever you're looking at those rival interpretations, I tend to favor the former, where it's a little bit, Nick is a reliable narrator.
Huh. Okay.
Certainly an argument can be made, and that's just to showcase that this is actually a very good work technically. Technically, it's a very good work. If you don't like it, that's fine. But like, you can't say it's bad and no one should read it. And
I
I'm
would.
going to jump off just very briefly, and then I'll rejoin if that's okay. I've got a couple phone calls coming in.
That's fine. We've been
We're
going for
right
2
at the
hours.
end now, to be honest with you.
Anyway, we can keep talking for a few minutes. Let him come back on if he needs,
Sure.
if he wants to finish. No, yeah, like while Larry Correa has sold many books and has been an influence on our own Pinkerton's Ghosts, the argument of personal taste is good for a tastemaker to make. But the problem is that Larry Correa doesn't really act as a tastemaker. He more is a marketer to the people who like things like Monster Hunter. Um, which is fine and well and good, but also not well and good depending on the situation. One of the things that really needs to be looked for is things like Passage Prize, for nuanced opinions, like what's the actual standing of The Great Gatsby within the canon? Is it something? We'll let him back in. Is it something that is to be despised or to be ignored, or is it in fact as valuable as our ancestors said it was? um, you know there's a reason why these books got popular, especially way back when. um, and like, we can't have the two thoughts in our head. They knew how to write back in the day, and the things they thought were masterworks are actually all terrible. Like, one or the other is false in that case. While I don't particularly like The Great Gatsby, that's a matter of taste. If I'm going to spend time reading a book and it's going to be high literature, I'm going to be reading something I haven't read before, quite frankly, or I'm going to read an author I know but I haven't read their work, like something like from Borges or Mishima. I've got Celine's Death on the Installment Plan unread. I could take a crack at that. Everyone says it's a masterpiece. Therefore, shall I not, attack it and read it, and see whether or not I enjoy the work of Celine. It's like, there's tiers to these things, and just because the hated English teacher, which even my mother was such a creature, the hated English teacher,
I
promotes
can't
it.
believe it.
I know. uh I couldn't believe it either when she did it for like 10 years. But the actually, so she's full-blooded English. So what would happen is that was basically her qualification. But the also it was a small Christian school. But also they had charity cases of people from the inner city, we'll say. And so what kept her safe was the fact that her tongue was absolutely savage, without actually using a slur. So what would happen is that, because she's a bit physically disabled, beyond, weaker than the average woman. um if they were, say, chimping out, she would put them down, with some clever way of saying, "Is that really how we act? I didn't realize I was a preschool teacher," or something like that. And they would become ashamed and settle down because one, she's just sitting there because she can't run or anything like that, so she's going to spit in your face. But also, it's like there's no comeback to that. The class is going, "Oh, she called you a preschooler. Ah, shut up." It's one of those things where if English teachers acted like that, I think people would actually have a much better recollection of their school years than what we have today, which dries it out. Like what vitalism there could be in Vitae Essence in The Great Gatsby is lost. Same with uh, oh my goodness, To Kill a Mockingbird and uh, why have I forgotten it? Oh,
Lord of the
the
Flies.
Lord of the Flies. Thank you. Uh, you know, there's things there. Like I've read Lord of the Flies twice. I haven't read most books twice. There are books I even say I've liked that I've only read once, and I've read some for some reason Lord of the Flies twice. It's got something to it more than the average bear. And even though in our circles, Mishima and Celine and stuff like that are brought up quite a bit. There has to be more gravy than the grave with this.
Hmm. And discounting, whether it's an English teacher or professor that just doesn't like you know Charles Dickens or Ernest Hemingway, and just going to say this is all just bad, and no one should read it, so I'm not going to put it in my class, or or someone over in our sphere a little bit more saying, well, like To Kill a Mockingbird is just flat out bad, and I just don't want to read it, and no one should read it, and it shouldn't be any part of a curriculum. I think is not necessarily a good sentiment to engender. Well, the most dramatic example of this, and it's going on for any kind of classical author, but if you try to, um, l- i- if you try, well, this time might be past a little bit, but for a while during the height of wokeism or um, uh, DEI, whatever you want to call it, like these English departments would go as far as to say, like, we shouldn't be teaching William Shakespeare because he is, a white man, and it's inherently impressive, and we need to elevate, you know, someone like I don't know, Toni Morrison or Chinua Achebe or someone like that, and teach them rather than any kind of Shakespeare. Um, and like you obviously don't want to lose Shakespeare. Like he's the most studied writings in the English language aside from the King James Bible, and for good reason. It's all fantastic, uh, but you can kind of see it a lot more in England and English culture than you would in American culture. Uh, what I'm about to describe, uh, because unlike American culture, like we don't prize our language as highly as like a cultural touchstone. It's more of a practical matter. Like in my opinion, in America, is like this is just the language that we use. It's offensive to us if you don't use this language because then we can't you know deal with you. we can't transact, or I'm not able to talk to you at the baseball game or whatever. But it's not like a cultural touchstone. Whereas in Great Britain, it is. And every once in a while, you'll see a British actor, an older British actor like Judi Dench, or Patrick Stewart, and they'll start performing some portion of Shakespeare, or uh, recite a sonnet, or something like that, and you can tell from the artistic way that they present it, um, that it was the absolute foundation of their entire acting career and their career in the arts. It all came up out of Shakespeare. They were performing Shakespeare, and knew Shakespeare very well, and understood the ins and outs of performing these masterpiece plays. Um, Now that our culture has kind of discounted it quite a bit, and it feels like uh, Shakespeare is now the purview of liberal arts colleges to, put their own spin on it, and maybe they'll be walking around with phalluses strapped to the front of them during a production of Coriolanus or something like that. Silly stuff like that, and no one wants to go out and see it. Uh, like, can you imagine someone like Tom Holland reciting? Like, I don't have a problem with Tom Holland; he's fine, but I just don't think he can go out and recite sonnets off the top of his head, at the top of his head, and perform them to the degree that other actors that are like 80 years old could do, because it's just not a foundation of his. And you can't lose the foundational works that have really propelled your entire culture forward without sacrificing a whole lot. And that's what happens when you tell people you do sacrifice and lose those foundational works whenever you tell people Othello is bad and you shouldn't read it because I just don't like it.
Did you hear that Othello was a Moor? I've just heard that just today.
There is a famous I will not repeat it, but there is a famous quote from Ernest Hemingway where he uses a less than savory word to describe Othello.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. All right. We've been going on quite some time now. We've given you your 2 hours. It's been an absolute pleasure, Felton. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we go?
No, no. Appreciate you guys having me. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully, I've been a good guest for you. But just a reminder for everyone. My only public work available currently is The Reckoning in Passage Prize 3. You can get that on the Passage Prize website. I am on Twitter. I post very, very, very infrequently. Um, and I would not expect a whole lot of 250 character tweets to uh, come out of me. I feel if you're going to try to be a literary artist, that Twitter just kind of dilutes your work. That's just my opinion. um, but eventually I'll start posting something on a Substack or something, and have a link in my Twitter page. So if you would like to follow, it's at Felton Faux at twitter.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And Twitter is for me a place of amusement more than literary work. And literary amusement, advertisement, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Isaac Young, who is more famous than all of us, well, at least me and Anthony. Well, actually, no, just me.
Mhm.
uh, he basically says, "Look, you just got to be posting to advertise your
Probably.
work. Like it doesn't matter. Just go for it. You have to be a modern person. And listen, I'm chopped and unk. He's a Zoomer. It's got to be something there. It's got to be something there.
You're probably right.
I bet he says 6'7" all the time. All
With
right,
the little
guys.
hand motion.
Yep. 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 So next week we are taking a break for Mother's Day. I'm going to a concert put on by a gentleman and his family, um, where his mother is the viola player. Uh, Look, when you do bouncing like I do, sometimes you just meet interesting people, and when they hand you a card that says there's going to be a family party at a place you've never heard of or been, it's either going to be a place where you're going to wake up losing a kidney, or it's going to be one of the best times of your life, and you just have to roll with it. Um, but also, it is a day to care for your mother and show her some appreciation. I've got a very lovely card I'm going to give her, and I'm going to make sure I take her out sometime during the week. But we'll be back the week after with Kursova Mag, or Not So Mag at this point, where we're going to talk about the Adrian Cole Kickstarter, which is for the Dream Lords, which is quite fun. It's a great little piece of fantasy. I think people will enjoy it. Thank you guys for coming along with us, and we hope you join us in 2 weeks' time.